01. So I'll call the June 9th, 2021 Transportation Commission meeting to order. Since Joe is doing double duty this evening, I'm going to read the introductory instructions for the virtual meeting. Welcome to our virtual meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. All panelists, that is alders, commission members, and staff, have the ability to mute and unmute themselves. Panelists can also rename themselves if they wish to add pronouns after their name. Please do not alter the naming convention otherwise. Also, please continue to use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Okay, Patrick, would you call the roll, please?
Okay, Charles Miadzi is not here yet. Barbara McKinney.
Present.
Okay, Chris McCahill.
Here.
Ann Kovich.
Here.
Denise Jess. It's not yet. Bill Bremer.
Here.
Ken Strite.
Here.
Bridget Brown.
Here.
Harold Cleams.
Here.
Okay.
And Denise was having computer issues, so she was trying to connect, so hopefully she'll be able to connect soon.
Yeah.
Did everybody have a chance to look at the minutes from the last meeting? If so, I would entertain a motion to approve. Ken, that's a motion?
Yep.
Is there a second? Alder Harrington McKinney. So there's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, Alder Miadzi just joined. I have to keep track of how many votes we need to pass motions. All right, seeing no hands, I'll assume a unanimous consent vote. If anyone is opposed to that or wishes to abstain and wants a roll call vote, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing no hands, the motion is carried. Patrick, you indicated we have someone for public comment on something not on the agenda?
Yeah, it's a Dave Davis wishes to speak.
Except that it's Carrie Rothberg. I have no idea why it said Dave Davis. So it's me. Dave Davis and I wrote this letter together. May I go ahead?
You may.
Okay.
Please.
All right. In the interests of accuracy, we just want to clarify several counterfactual statements made during the discussion of the pavement markings on New Cedar on May 23rd. I'm assuming 3 minutes and I will be 2.5. We believe that these untrue statements may have had a bearing on the decision that this commission made to support buffered bike lanes, alternative 1, rather than opt for more on-street parking, alternative 2 on Cedar Street. So here's the first deal. The number of on-site parking stalls planned for the new building on the Truman Olson site is not to code. Alder Evers had said it was. When the commission asked whether the 162 parking stalls planned for the Truman Olson development meet the required amount of parking for a development of that size, Alder Evers stated he was pretty sure they do, but they do not. By code, this building is required to have 210 parking stalls for its 150 dwelling units and a business measuring 24,000 square feet. It has the 162 instead of 210. Staff review comments for this project make that completely clear. They date 6/02/2021, and they say a parking reduction will be required. The developer needs to submit a request for a parking reduction, including information to support the request. This request has not been submitted, so currently the development is out of compliance for required parking. The shortage of parking is the reason why so many community members began to advocate more than a year ago for the maximum possible number of on-street parking spots on Cedar. Second point, the current Pick and Save has 110 on-site parking stalls, not 90, as stated by Alder Evers on May 26th. Market research on supermarkets nationwide verifies what for most is common sense in designing parking for supermarkets. Full-service supermarkets typically provide adequate parking for their peak shopping times and cater to the shopper. I'm now quoting from the American Planning Association site design on shopping centers. The shopper wants a space he can find easily with a minimum of difficulty and one in moving around the parking area, and one that is located near the store. The new supermarket will be located between two heavily traveled streets used by more than 40,000 vehicles per day, and we expect that there will be a heavy demand for parking during the afternoon commuting hours. Research recommends a bare minimum of 3 to 4 parking stalls for every 1,000 city to the store. This would mean that Truman Olson should have 72 to 96 dedicated parking spots for New Lunas. It has 60, and that is why the community has spoken out at meetings to request as much on-street parking as possible. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Does anybody have any comments or questions for the registrant? Seeing no hands, thank you for coming and sharing that information with us. Okay. Disclosures and recusals this evening. Are there any? Please raise your hand if there are. Okay, there should be protocol on how long I have to wait to see if somebody raises a hand. I'll have to look that up and see if there is. Okay, so item number 2, Legislature 65613, Keith Pollock, approval of taxi cab operators license renewal.
Am I to speak?
If you want to just give a very, very brief presentation.
Sure. So this is our 2-year license renewal for taxi cabs. We are indeed recommending that all existing cab companies are approved. We are less one cab company this year is Badger Cab, who went out of business in March of 2020. This year, they don't have to pay the associated license fees and permit fees as they were waived by the Common Council. We went through the whole process this year of reviewing their application and their application materials, and we found it all to be acceptable. That's why we recommend the approval of 2021-3 taxi cab operator licenses. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Sure, Ken, go ahead.
I was just going to move approval. I think the documents are pretty thorough, and the only thing that's sort of shocking is just how old, on average, everything other than the Teslas are. That is our equipment. But anyway, I move approval.
Alder Harrington McKinney.
I have a question of staff, and my question, and Madam Chair, you can tell me if I'm out of order. The 2 new alders were the sponsors of this. My question is that why was that so? Because there are more experienced members of this commission other than the 2 newest ones. So that was just a curiosity.
You'd have to ask Keith or Patrick, because I don't know who did that, Keith or Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, I think I had asked Patrick who are the alders on the commission, as I wasn't up to date, and that was the 2 names he gave me. It was pretty much as simple as that. They have to be alder people.
Okay, and so if I'm in order, and I don't know, and please let me know if I'm in order. This came out of the commission, and if there is approval, I think that the commission should be listed as sponsors, unless there's something that I don't know about.
Patrick, I don't think we typically show as a sponsor, do we?
No, it has to be one of the alders. And we usually go for those that are associated with the board, committee, or commission that handles the business at hand.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the education. I'm clear. Thank you.
Okay, for some reason I can't raise and lower hands this evening, so I'm not exactly sure what's going on. Okay, thank you. All right, so we have a motion. Is there a second? Chris?
Yeah, second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Further discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody is opposed or wishes to abstain or wishes a roll call vote. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, the motion is carried. Thank you very much, Keith.
Nine.
Okay, next, I just wanted to come back and update you because back when we talked about speed humps on Lakeside Street, I had promised to draft a referral form from the Transportation Commission to the Transportation Policy and Planning Board talking about this issue. I have been working on it. It's not that I haven't, but the Traffic Calming Subcommittee has also been discussing this very same issue. And so I was waiting until we had talked about this at several of our meetings. And it appears to me that Vision Zero and Completing Green Streets are two vehicles for addressing this particular issue. And I do need to meet with Yang because I think he had an additional idea for me with regard to that. So when I bring it back to you, it's going to be much more comprehensive than just, we have this issue we want to refer to you. We have this issue and there have been a lot of conversations about it. And these are the things that we've discussed and that we would really like to know the answers to or have policy decisions made regarding it, because it's something that we've talked about extensively and I want to make sure that I'm really thorough on that. So I just wanted to let you know that this is not something that I've forgotten, and I do continue to work on it, and I'll bring it back to you at a future meeting, hopefully in the near future. Are there any comments or questions for me on that? Okay, thanks. Ken, report from the Appeals Subcommittee on appeals of denied taxi cab drivers permits.
Denise and Ann and I conducted a hearing. The young woman who applied was in a situation where she had an old case. She had another case that was sort of pending, and it was sort of difficult because it was a pending case. And so from a Fifth Amendment perspective, we really couldn't ask her questions about the case, but we could ask questions about the process. And it appears that this is an extended pretrial motion situation where the court and the attorneys are basically letting her over a period of a year by undergoing different kind of treatment programs and other kind of accountability. My guess as an attorney is that this case would be dismissed or radically reduced to the type of offense that wouldn't even appear. And I think we also concluded that even the offenses that were stated and admitted to nowadays, because you have payment by credit card and things like that, they were basically theft cases that we're talking about, not any kind of violent crime or anything like that. And it was a retail theft. So sort of when you're just looking at a lot of crime is opportunistic, this is not a kind of person, even if they repeated the behavior, that a taxi cab provides the opportunities that would be in her strike zone. So we all discussed it, and we told her that we thought she should get the license. She had a company that she was working for or had applied for who was very enthusiastic about supporting her. And a big part of it is sort of this supports her ongoing treatment program. Denise, Ann, is that pretty much the situation? The other person withdrew. He had initially applied for a taxi license because different physical limitations were keeping him from continuing to work at his job for a good reason, or by happenstance, that job, that employer found a different opportunity for him. And so he continues now to work in a different position at that job and withdrew his application.
Anybody have any questions for Ken? Questions or comments? Okay, since we show this as a report on the agenda, just to be safe, let's ask for a motion to approve or accept the report. Bridget? Motion from Bridget. A second by Harold. Any further discussion? Okay, I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote unless you wish to vote no or abstain. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, motion's carried. Okay, we have a lot of TC business tonight. Our annual work plan is item number 5. And the changes that I worked with staff on updating this. And in the notes section at the beginning, I changed it to remind staff that presentations should be brief, should indicate what's requested of the commission, and should include staff's recommendation. And those are 3 of the things that are really important to us to keep the meeting moving forward efficiently and for us to be more effective with our time. And then some other changes, we added Vision Zero projects on an annual basis in the April, May, June quarter. We put the taxi cab renewals in that same quarter just so it's on our radar. They typically happen only every other year, but still a great reminder so we can get out in front of them. As we talked about last time, these expire at the end of June, and so we're kind of cutting it close. So it'd be good to have it on there as a reminder. And we also added the public works projects that Chris Pedikowski and his group bring to us in that same quarter as well, because, well, they're in every other quarter, and we actually have some that are going to come this quarter yet. So they're just in every quarter now. Other changes, a tip review. I noted that we might see that at a Transportation Policy and Planning Board meeting. And that works fine because we just have a review and feedback role in that. And so no approval is required. So that might be more efficient. In terms of special projects, I updated the Madison Shared Streets and Slow Streets, the Traffic Calming Subcommittee, the Judge Doyle Square, added parking enforcement operational transfer, and deleted the Wilson Street Corridor study since that was completed. So this would be our annual work plan for the next year, but we decided as a group that we want to review it on a quarterly basis. So we have an opportunity to change it every quarter, which we have done. I think the past 2 years, at least once during the year, we've made changes to the work plan as they come up. So it can be more fluid and representative of what we're doing. And I find it very helpful to me as chair because it helps me look ahead a quarter and say, okay, in addition to what's coming from the council or other things that come up, we have these things that we have to make sure that we get into our agenda over the course of the next 3 months. So comments or questions? Anything that you'd like to see added, deleted, changed? Harold.
Yeah, I guess.
You're muted again, Harold. I don't know what happened. We could hear you, but now we can't.
Yeah, I think anyway, I'm back. Just the observation about the last section of the document, the special projects and or reviews for the specific work plan year. There's something about safety, like this is on top of page 7, safety issues related to bicyclists, motorists, and pedestrians wearing earbuds or talking on cell phones.
I can give you the history of that, Harold, and we haven't really done anything on that. It was something that a professor at the university had some grave concerns about it and had come and spoken to us. And gosh, I think this goes back a couple years. And it seemed to be to me to be a really relevant issue. So we sort of parked it there so that we could look at it and deal with it as appropriate. We haven't had an opportunity to do anything with it. So are you thinking that it is not relevant, or what comments did you have?
Well, I mean, I think it's helpful to know that, yeah, this has been on there for a while. I just had no recollection of this ever coming up at the TC, so it must have been before my time. So, yeah, that's all fine. We can leave it on here.
Do you agree that it's a relevant issue?
That I would need to know more about. Okay. I mean, this seems like more of a Vision Zero kind of thing. Like, if it's safety relevant, then. But anyway.
Well, I'll make a note of that, and when I talk to Yang, I'll talk to him about that, Harold. Alder Harrington McKinney. Oops.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Yes.
I would like to tentatively put in our work plan just an overview from the RESG in terms of how transportation fits, and if you could have a conversation with that with RESG to see how that would fit into our transportation piece, so that we can be looking at how that fits, because there's a lot of things that's coming before us, and we are critically making those recommendations. But I want to have a mindset that we do have that overview of diversity and inclusion and equality. And I would be very satisfied if you would have that conversation and see how that would fit into our overall work plan.
Okay. Is this something, I think that's great. And are you thinking that this is something that we should do on an annual basis as like a reminder, or as a special project, just a one-time thing?
I think that once you have that conversation, you'll have a sense of what to bring back to us. And so I would be depending upon you having that conversation and bringing the outcome of that conversation back to the commission, and then the commission can determine whether this is a one-time annual thing or we need to have it more regularly.
Okay. All right. Very good. I'll do that. Denise, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chair. I would echo Alder McKinney, and I know that we are planning to do some DEI and anti-racism work, and so I'd like to see that reflected somehow in the work plan as well.
Oh, are you talking about the workshops that we're doing, Denise?
Yeah. I think I'd like to see them somehow reflected here, because it is an important part of the Commission's work. And if I were not on the Commission, it would be interesting and meaningful for me to know that the Commission cares about those issues and uses them as a filter for making decisions. So somehow reflecting, maybe it's a different section or just a note that the Commission is undertaking that piece of work.
We could add it on under special projects and reviews for this specific work plan year.
Yeah, I'd like to see it there. That would be awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, great suggestion. Alder Harrington McKinney, did you have your hand up for another reason, or do you?
No, let me take it down. I'm sorry.
I got it. There we go. Hey, all of a sudden I can raise and lower them again. Joe must have fixed it for me. Thank you, Joe. Okay, other thoughts, great feedback. So would you like me to work on these things and then bring this back to another meeting so that we can act on it then? Or we can act on it in this version and then amend it later. I mean, I'm happy to bring it back after those conversations and have us wait to take action on it, if that's your preference. Because I want to make sure that the work plan reflects the whole commission. Alder Harrington McKinney, go ahead.
I've been on this commission for just a short time, and I've been really impressed with the quality of work and the detail of the work plan. So I would not be against if the body wanted to move this on and then to come back and add it. So I certainly would not object to that. And so I would let the will of the experienced body.
Okay. Well, how about if we make the motion that I will add our equity workshops to the special projects and research with RESG as to how we can add an overview from them into our work plan and bring that back at a later date. So Denise, I think your suggestion, I can add that, going off of the RFP that Tom put together and included from that. And then Alder Harrington McKinney, I won't add yours because I need to do research and come back and talk with you before we do that. Does that make sense? That's a little bit of a complicated motion, Patrick, but does that work? Okay. All right. Is anybody willing to make that motion? Chris?
Yes, so moved.
Okay. There's a motion. Is there a second? Alder Miazzi? Is that a second? Okay. There's a second from Alder Miazzi. Okay.
Raise hand button.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, well, assuming unanimous consent vote, if anybody wishes to vote no or abstain or would like a roll call vote, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing no hands raised, the motion carried. So I will add in Denise's suggestion, and then I will, Patrick, you can maybe help me figure out exactly who to talk to, if you would, so that I can connect with the right people. And then I will come back and report back to the TC, and we can have a discussion about how we might want to incorporate that into our work plan. Great suggestions. Thank you very much. Okay. Next, we have our special rules and TC handbook. There were not many changes that I recommended this time, and I talked with staff as well. The changes that we have are on page 7. I added Imagine Madison and Complete and Green Streets into our orientation and training for the Transportation Commission. And then on the very last page, on page 19, I added the special rule that we've been talking about in order to promote better discussions and interactions and connections with all of the members of the Transportation Policy and Planning Board. We're lucky we have 2 members, Chris and Alder Harrington McKinney, are on both bodies, but we've had a lot of topics where, excuse me, where people from the Transportation Policy and Planning Board might want to come and express their opinion. And rather than having to suspend the rules every time, what I've proposed, and I worked with John Strange in the City Attorney's Office on this, is it's very similar to the other alders who aren't on the commission. They have the right to come in and take part in our discussions. They don't count toward a quorum. They can't make motions, and they can't vote. And that would be the case here. So anybody from the Transportation Policy and Planning Board who's not a member of the TC can come and participate in the discussions, and this would facilitate that further integration of the 2 bodies. So does anybody have any other comments, or questions or other suggestions with regard to the handbook? Chris, go ahead.
Thanks. I was just wondering, when you were talking with the city attorneys about that last modification, I assume they were comfortable that didn't require any new noticing of a possible quorum of TPPB.
That's on our agenda now. What we did, Chris, was because we've both been inviting each other to these meetings. You can see at the top of our agenda, a quorum of the Transportation Policy and Planning Board may be present. So, and Patrick, I think the TPPB is doing that as well, are they not? Yeah. So what we're doing is so each agenda every time provides that notice. So just in case, we're good to go.
Okay.
Yeah, great question though.
I'm trying to think about that. There was a recent meeting that worked that way, and I think I was not aware that it was cross-posted because it wasn't listed. I forget which meeting it was. I guess that's fine. I just wonder whether it's not very transparent to the public that there is no TPPB meeting listed under the TPPB schedules, so they would not be looking for that.
That's true, but if they look at the Transportation Commission agenda, they would see that there might be enough members of the TPPB for there to be a quorum of that present. So Patrick, I think that from my understanding and talking with John, that should cover us, shouldn't it?
That's the impression that I got from him as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Earl, go ahead.
Just two small observations, one along this line. I wonder if it would make sense to have this particular section further up in section 7, where we explicitly talk about the relationship between TPPB and TC. I mean, that it seems to fit in that section, possibly.
Well, my understanding with John is that it has to be in its own section of special rules, because then what I have to do, I mean, if it's approved tonight, what I do is I have to send those special rules to the city clerk. So they're on record with the city clerk. So they have to all be together.
Okay, that makes total sense. I will defer to the people who know how this stuff works.
Let me just say, having said that, that doesn't mean that I couldn't. What page was that, Harold? Did you mention?
Page 8, section 7.
Okay, so that doesn't mean that I couldn't make reference to the special rule in that section. If you think it would be helpful, I could certainly say that, in order to promote, better integration or better communication between the two bodies, the Transportation Commission has adopted a special rule and then referenced that section. Do you think that would be helpful?
I don't have strong opinions on that. Maybe, maybe not. I leave that entirely up to your discretion. So, yeah. And then the other thing that I just wanted to mention, we've added a couple things, like, as you said, Imagine Madison and Complete and Green Streets. Yes. And it refers to the Transportation Commission website. And I was reminded, oh, right, we have our own little website, which has all these helpful links. So making sure that whatever is in here will also be on there, which
it will.
There's small mismatches, but other than that, it's great.
So we will. I checked, and unfortunately, Complete and Green Streets says coming soon. So I don't think it's ready yet, but when it is ready, we'll do that. And also, Harold, after when the work plan, Harold, Patrick, I'll have to revise that and get the new version out to you. After I add that section from Denise. So then that will be posted on the website. And then when approved and finalized, that the handbook will also be posted on the website. So anybody who's wants information about the TC can go to our website and get both the handbook and the work plan. So it's very, Denise, you were talking about, making sure the public is aware of what we do. And Elder Harrington McKinney, you were talking about making sure everybody realizes what we care about. We've tried to be very public about who we are and what we're doing and what we want to do. And so the website that's our way of doing that, is to let people know, it gives them easy access to our work plan and our handbook, which basically tells you everything you need to know. Well, pretty much everything you need to know about the Transportation Commission. So, Ken, go ahead.
Just thinking ahead, and things have been, I think, sometimes too fluid while we've been doing Zoom, but figuring we're going to be done with Zoom and we can figure out later on. Just thinking ahead, at some point we're going to be in person. And I recall...
I'll just say maybe not, Ken. I'll be talking about that during my announcements later. So,
well, in 2022, we'll probably be meeting in person. Anyway, just the issue of having some boundaries as far as when things come for discussion. And so like a typical thing would be if Alder McKinney Harrington was not on this committee, but there was something affecting her district, the tradition back in the room was she's invited to come to the table. She's sort of at the one end of the table, I think the north end of the table or whatever. Rules are sort of suspended or the 3-minute rule isn't there. And there's a period of time then where there might be a discussion back and forth. And then whether you would do it or somehow it moves then to a thing of saying, okay, now it's just sort of the commission that's going to be talking back and forth. And I think that's important. Part of it is Chris's thing as far as, is this a meeting or whatever, but to more clearly clarify, because I think what we've been experiencing more recently are things where we're way in the midst of a discussion on a motion or something like that, and we're really sort of past the time when we're asking questions of Keith Pollock or whoever else is coming in, and all of a sudden people are coming back into the meeting. And I don't mind doing that. I just think we should sort of have some clarity as far as does that work or doesn't that work? That's all.
Well, let me say in 3301 on boards, committees, and commissions, alders are by ordinance able to come and participate in any of our discussions at any point. They can't vote. They can't make motions unless they're part of the Transportation Commission, and they don't count toward a quorum. So at any point of the discussion, whether it's on a motion or anything, I believe that the alders can, according to that ordinance, take part in that discussion. So
what I would say, Ann, is I think the alders sort of have the self-imposed rule where they sort of, it's not an official rule, but they sort of have this thing of saying, okay, I've done my piece. Chris has stopped asking me questions. Ken stopped asking me questions. It's now time for them to, they do that. And I think there maybe needs to be an understanding when we're inviting other people. Anyway, that was just the general thing, because I think there were a couple of times, especially in the last meeting, where it sort of got confusing as far as what role was the person talking in at that time.
Okay, well, I think if you're talking about open meetings or how boards, committees, and commissions work, that's not something that we can do unless we want to make a special rule. And that would certainly be something we'd have to talk to John Strange about. But I think if we're talking about alders, that's already part of the ordinance in terms of what they can do and what they can't do at meetings, is my understanding. So
it wasn't the alders issue. I think it's the thing as we're trying to be, on the one hand, cooperative with TPPB, but then we're still separate entities. And that's I think where the lines get blurred.
Well, what the special rule that we've proposed does is allow TPPB to act like alders. In other words, participate. If Tom Wilson were here, he could participate in any of our discussions, just like he's a member of the commission. He couldn't make a motion. He couldn't vote. He wouldn't count toward a quorum. Just like, if Alder Foster were here, he could participate in any of our discussions, whether it's before the motion or after the motion. He just can't vote, and they don't make those motions or count toward quorums. So that's my understanding of how it works. So we're basically saying they can just participate. Chris, go ahead.
My experience has only been at TC and TPPB, but I think there might be something procedural to what Ken's saying, and it might just be worth talking to like the chair of Plan Commission or something to see how they would handle this sort of thing.
I'm not sure I understand the issue, Chris, because perhaps you can clarify for me, Ken.
Well, in the same way that we, in theory, we have periods for question and periods for discussion, and we maintain that kind of order.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would address some of this confusion that sometimes comes up.
Okay, I'm sorry if you think I'm not running the meeting appropriately.
I wasn't here last time, so I don't know the specific situation, but.
Yeah, I guess my point is I was understanding the issue was that you thought people were talking at times when they shouldn't talk. And my understanding of, and I think when it comes to TPPB members in the past, we've suspended, I've required, and I did check with John Strange about this, we were required to make a motion to suspend the rules in order to allow them to participate in discussion. And if we did, then they could participate in any of the discussion, whether it was just during the presentation part or during a discussion on a motion. They just couldn't vote or make the motion. So that's my understanding. So I'm not sure how talking to Liddell Zellers would help me clarify that, but I'm always happy to talk to Liddell because she offers good advice. Alder Harrington, McKinney, go ahead.
Okay, I didn't know if Harold's hand was up before mine.
Yours is showing us first in my queue.
Oh, okay. So in the discussion that we've been having, and has nothing to do with you managing your position as chair. So for me, my question is that do we suspend the rules to allow that conversation throughout the meeting at every meeting, or because so my question is, it's at some point when there's an open discussion on an issue and now it's in the hands of the commission, is it then in the hands of the commission, or still is it up to open discussion? And so and that's the part that I'm not really clear on, and maybe because I'm new and just sometimes I don't know. And so that blurring is what I, as a new alder, have to understand, is at what point do alders continue to participate in the discussion? Is that okay? Or is there a time when the discussion is in the hands of the commissioners? So that was just my input.
Sure, and I will check with John Strange to get his thoughts with regard to that. But what the ordinance says is council participation. Every subunit, whether created by ordinance, resolution, or order, shall permit any member of the Common Council to take part in its deliberations and to speak on any agenda item. This includes closed sessions of subunits except as provided herein, or if the individual member's exclusion is necessary for the purpose of the closed session. Nevertheless, council members who are not members of the subunit shall not vote, shall not be counted in determining whether or not there's a quorum, and may not make or second any motions. Doesn't apply to quasi-judicial hearings on contested matters, nor to deliberations concerning such hearings, and I don't think the rest of that applies. So my interpretation was that they could talk about, they could offer their comments during the presentation phase, or if we were talking about a motion. Now, I'll certainly clarify that, because the language that we're proposing here for the Transportation Policy and Planning Board members is exactly the same as what's, I mean, I just copied it and John Strange said it was fine. I just copied it from what alders can do. So I'll confirm that with John. But that's my impression, because deliberations, I would say, would mean talking about motions as well. So do you want me to clarify that before we adopt this? Because I certainly can. Harold, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think clarifying this and clarifying it, I mean, I think it's more clear what this means for council members. It's somewhat less clear for what we're trying to do here. But I mean, getting the clarification either way, I think would be helpful. I mean, deliberation seems pretty broad, but maybe also getting a sense of, like, is there a limit to what is covered by deliberations? Because I mean, presumably alders not in the commission, for example, can't make motions, right?
They can't, but they can participate in deliberations. So I would assume that would mean deliberations about motions as well. Yeah.
That would be my understanding as well, but always good idea to talk to council about this.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do that. So I guess I was trying to be very inclusive with the Transportation Policy and Planning Board members so that they could, so, and I don't know if the TPPB is thinking of adopting a special rule like this, but Tom has been welcoming and has allowed me to ask questions whenever I've wanted to. But this particular issue has not come up. So I can certainly get clarification from John on that. So why don't I do that and then bring it back at our next meeting so we can reconsider. And I can certainly ask him if we certainly can't change what alders can do, but it's our special rule relative to what Transportation Policy and Planning Board members can do. Would it be your preference that they can ask questions and discuss prior to motions being made, but not participate during discussions about motions? Is that where you're headed with it? Ken, was that where you were headed with your original thought? And Chris, you sort of were on board with that?
Yeah, the part where I was confused is when it sort of got, so it goes back to the Cedar Street thing. And it seemed like we were getting to the point where people other than commission members were engaging with people from the neighborhood directly and asking them questions or responding to their comments, which I thought sort of was outside the bubble of what, you know what I mean? That's the part where I think there needs to be that kind of clarity. And at least, in the past, when we've done this with alders, I don't think I can ever remember an alder doing that. Whether that's just sort of the hidden handbook of alders or something like that, but that they sort of let it up to the commission to decide how to respond to people who were testifying and things like that. And that's I think the edge that I'm want to be more clear about as far as who's responding to people who are testifying before the commission.
Okay, well, I don't feel like going back and watching that whole meeting again, but
I would recommend against it. Yeah.
Yeah. I try very hard to remind people. I mean, we've had people from the neighborhood, like we did on Lakeside Street, where they had their hand in the air and they wanted to ask questions and participate. And I had to say, no, that's really not how this works. And typically I've asked, are there members of the commission, do you have questions of the registrants? And we've allowed that. I do seem to recall there was one odd thing where I thought it was a commission member had a question for one of the registrants. And so we asked if that person was still there, and we went back and got it answered. I would say this on Cedar Street, I was trying to be overly inclusive because we had a lot of people who were very interested, and I thought it was my personal opinion that we should hear from everybody. But typically it's just commission members who have that ability to ask questions of registrants. Right. I would not, that's not, I don't think that would be allowed under this special rule, if that's anybody's concern. So I just think TC members can only ask questions. I'll verify that. That's my understanding. Just writing a note here. Other comments or questions? Okay. I would just say it's not always easy to manage meetings when we have a lot of these things going on. But in any event, all great comments, and I will clarify with John and also ask him if folks want to just limit the TPPB participation to the presentation stage and not participate after motions have been made, how we would do that. Unless you don't think we should adopt the special rule at all. I mean, we can just not, and we would have to suspend the rules every time that a TPPB member comes. But if we write a special rule and we're really clear about how we're inviting them to participate, that might be even better. Because if we just suspend the rules and say we, allow you to participate in our discussion, then that might not be clear as to which part they could participate in and which part they could not participate in. So I don't know what your thoughts are in that regard.
And first of all, I think there's a reason nobody's challenging you to replace you as chair. It's a thankless job, and so you can feel safe tonight that nobody's going to usurp your position. I think just talking with John.
Any volunteers?
I'm really good at reading faces here, and there's nobody that's coming after you. But anyway, I think clarifying with John or getting his suggestions, sure. I would be comfortable with that, and then just going on.
Yeah, well, I'll do that, and I'll bring this back next time so that we can understand exactly what we're doing. Sound good? And it's always good, and I do welcome conversation, and it's I learned something new at every meeting in terms of what's the best way to make a meeting work and what's the best way, what might be good to think about changing in the future. And I learned something new about the city's rules and the ordinances and how to interpret them. So I do appreciate that, and I welcome it. So don't think that I don't. So I will check in with John, and we'll put this on assuming I can get with him, we will look at that again next time. Okay, anything else on the handbook before we move on? Okay, if you have any other ideas, certainly let me know. Next, we have the crossover report. Chris or Alder Harrington McKinney, any updates for us from TPPB?
And the TPPB hasn't met since our last meeting, so this shouldn't that shouldn't have been on the agenda. Sorry.
Yeah, we normally wouldn't, but if do you have any hot topics coming up or anything you guys want to share? I mean, we are trying to keep people informed so that people know if it's a good meeting to sit in, because there is a meeting on Monday. So, although I don't know if you guys are aware of what's even going to be on the agenda yet. Okay, well, we'll just move on. How's that? Unless Chris or Alder Harrington McKinney, you have anything? All right. Update on the traffic calming subcommittee. We've had 2 meetings since our last meeting, May 27th and June 3rd. At the May 27th meeting, we spent more time talking about the updated project prioritization and evaluation criteria. Staff brought some examples, which was very helpful as we worked on refining the tool. We made a ton of progress there. At June 3rd meeting, we talked about the acceptable level of danger on our city streets, which related to fire trucks and speed humps. And we expanded the discussion into barriers and obstacles to Safe Street Madison and other things that that we might need to balance as we're going forward. So another really good discussion. We've added some additional meetings into our schedule. We're pretty much meeting every week, I think. We still need to talk about equity, work on our solutions toolbox. We're going to talk about what the program is not, so it's really clear. And then work on our implementation plan to include some of that in the final report. And then we obviously have to work on the resolution for the Common Council and the final report review. And we have a good solid draft of the report, which just needs to be updated with a lot of the stuff we've been working on in the past month or two. So any comments or questions on traffic calming subcommittee? Okay. This meeting would have been longer, except we had a couple of items that were pulled and pushed to the next meeting, but I don't think anybody's going to complain about that. So announcements from the chair. So we have a TC meeting scheduled for July 14th. We also have a joint TC-TPPB meeting scheduled for July 19th, which is scheduled at the time of the normal TPPB meeting. So I have an email that I sent out to TC and TPPB leadership and staff, I don't recall yesterday or the day before, reminding that that's the tentative date we'd set, talking about agenda. So I'll keep you posted in that regard. I attended the Common Council Executive Committee meeting yesterday to offer some comments and listen to the discussion regarding in-person, hybrid, and virtual meetings. Harold was there as well. Alder Foster attended. I think Alder Harrington McKinney, you were there as well. So the CCEC consensus was the desire to have the default meeting method for BCCs be virtual. So if TC wishes to remain virtual, we would need to do nothing. And we did talk about this some during this section of the agenda last time. BCCs could vote to meet in person if so inclined. However, that request would need to go through the mayor's office and get Common Council leadership approval. In addition, there would need to be adequate notice for the change, at least 2 weeks and preferably a month, because obviously rooms have to be found. They have to figure out logistics and things like that. Public buildings obviously would need to be reopened in order for the meetings to be in person, and the rooms have to be available. The IT folks indicated that they need 6 weeks to re-engineer the registration system to allow for both in-person meetings and virtual meetings. So that's a bit of a barrier to anybody who would want to return to in-person meetings. Once a default mode is chosen, the body could vote to change that. So that would go through the same process. We would need to vote. The request would need to go to the mayor's office and the common council leadership for approval, and there would need to be adequate notice and time to get it done. So this was the consensus that was verbally discussed. I think we'll have to watch for formal notification about this topic. And Patrick, if you can help watch for that, because I'm sure it'll probably come through you and alders as you hear as well. So Alder Harrington McKinney, Harold, anybody else who, Alder Miazzi, I don't think you were on CCCEC yesterday, but anybody else who was there, please add your thoughts. Otherwise, comments or questions. Chris, go ahead.
Thanks. I was wondering if there was any discussion of if a body chose to go back to in-person, would that be a hybrid meeting so that the public could be virtual?
Yeah, there's
so it would force the public to show up in person if we chose to go in person.
Yes, my understanding is right now they can't support hybrid meetings because there's additional equipment that needs to be available. If you're interested, Chris, go to the, or Patrick, maybe you could send a link out to the CCEC meeting because there's a memo in there from the IT folks that talks about the various requirements and what they need to do in order to go. I think the council is very interested in that hybrid, at least the members of the council who were there, many are interested in the idea of hybrid meetings because if the Common Council has a really long meeting and I want to sit at my house and participate virtually, that has a lot of appeal to a lot of people. So I think they want to get there, Chris, but I think it's going to take some time and potential investment in order to get there. I don't know, Harold and Alder Harrington McKinney, I think, didn't they say sometime in 2022 there'd have to be additional budget and equipment and things like that?
Absolutely. It came around, there's overtime, the budget constraints and staffing. And so they would have to expand staffing to be able to do that. But what they're doing is projecting to the end of 2021 and then to see what is determined going into 2022. So absolutely. And if that hybrid, and so there's no cost estimates as yet in terms of staffing, overtime, and overall cost of equipment, and all those modifications are still under consideration.
Yeah. And it's my sense that, I mean, the mayor said at one point that there was, discussion, and I think Alder Furman talked about at the TFOGS meetings and the TFOGS implementation that the best of all worlds would be that members of the body, members of the public, staff, everybody could choose whether they wanted to be in person or virtual. But a lot of the discussion and some of my personal concerns centered around how do you manage a meeting like that? If some of you were in person and some of you were virtual, and some of everybody was both. So, there are a lot of logistics that would have to be dealt with. So, Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary. Like, there's no one hybrid option that's clearly defined. Like, it's a spectrum, and a lot of them come with all of these downsides that you have mentioned. I guess one thing that I found interesting during the discussion, and I would encourage people to watch the video recording, I think it was a really good discussion with people bringing stuff up. We're like, oh, wow, I had not thought about that, and that's a really good point, was this idea of BCCs potentially having special meetings in person for the purposes of, I think a lot of people made the point, it would be really nice to get, we haven't met a lot of us haven't met each other in person, and there's a real value to that. But given all the difficulties with having meetings fully in person, maybe there's space for once a year or twice a year or in whatever frequency. Maybe when new commissioners join the commission, there would be the potential for having a special meeting, maybe with a different agenda than usual. I thought that was a really interesting idea somewhere in between there.
Yeah. And that was, I know Alder Foster mentioned one of the BCCs he was on. They talked about wanting to meet virtually, but potentially meet in person. Was it quarterly, did he mention? I think, or some, just periodically, once or twice a year or something. So, and I think that would be possible under the system that they were discussing. It's just, as I understand it now, it's either all virtual or all in person, just because of the logistics. So it was a very interesting meeting. So I agree with Harold. It would be good to watch it. So the consensus was that BCCs would remain all virtual, and if that is in fact what we choose to do, then we don't need to do anything. We just keep on like we have been keeping on. We don't have it on the agenda to discuss this evening, but we certainly can put it on a future agenda if people would like to discuss whether we would be virtual or in person. And perhaps once we get the formal notification in terms of what we can do, we can place it on the agenda when we have all of that information. Okay. Are there any other comments or questions on that? Future agenda topics. Got some things that were deferred from tonight. The approval of the bus stop changes, some public works projects were deferred. Potentially the Madison Yards, Sheboygan Avenue bike lanes will come back. This is saved in Legistar. Does anybody have any other agenda items that aren't already on the list for us to add for future agenda topics? Okay. And thanks for all your feedback and input on everything. It is much appreciated. And I think it's great. We have a very active group of people, and I really value that. So I do appreciate everybody's thoughts, and welcome and encourage you to continue in that regard. So I need a motion to adjourn. I think this is, wow. We needed one of these, didn't we? Alder Miadzi, motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Chris, there's a second. Thanks everybody. Have a great evening.